Okay. Thank you all for joining me. Let's hope we get through this without having to stop. I did the podcast that I did earlier this week with Yitzhak Sokolov. Got interrupted three times before we could finish the podcast. Hopefully, it won't go this way. It's been not the quiet. Well, the day has actually been relatively quiet. The day is only once today did we have to go to the bomb shelter. Not the same for last night. Last night was four times. Most people in Tel Aviv are walking around, not only Tel Aviv, obviously, rather bleary eyed. I usually say Tel Aviv, and my wife corrects me, shouldn't be talking about Tel Aviv, you talk about all of Israel, and it's true. But this is, my column's called Tel Aviv Diary, so I, by nature, often revert to Tel Aviv, and the picture, of course, you're seeing behind you is Tel Aviv, and of course, Tel Aviv is where I live. In any case, there was a sense for a couple of days that the Iranians may be running out of missiles or some other version they're in. At least at the moment, that's not the sense. There is what there is a real sense, and no one can quite put their finger on it. I certainly can't. No one in my family can. As a matter of fact, I was even speaking to one of the aides of Gadi Eisenkot a little while ago, and she agreed, but she also couldn't explain it. How this time is seems different. There's something different about this time than even during the the war with Iran in last June. We're all being more cautious. We're staying home even more than we did the previous time. Uh, I can't really put my finger on it. And the last time we did have, unfortunately, much more significant direct hits than we've had this time. We haven't had too many direct hits primarily because the Iranians have only been able to fire one or two or three maximum missiles at one time, which means that the chances of being intercepted by the interceptor system is extremely high. It's almost close to 100%. But what's been happening is about 50% of the missiles being sent to us have multiple warheads on them. And so these teeny warheads, even when you hit and destroy the missile, the physics makes these teeny warheads to continue coming. And so they land with a high speed and with an explosive charge. So one of them landed in Bnei Brak more or less this afternoon, and it landed on the top floor of a building. It went through the two stories of the building and then exploded in an apartment on the second floor. Luckily, no one was in the building. Everyone was in their safe places. I think there was that had a um, that had a bomb shelter, so only one person was lightly hurt from flying glass. I'm not sure where he or she was. He was in this case. Um, so these little bomblets uh, can cause damage, and if you're outside, they can kill you, obviously. But they can't do what a full-scale bomb that's 1,000 kilos can, which is level a block. And they can't really even collapse a house in the way the full, apartment building like the big bombs were able to do. They can cause damage, but as long as Israelis are following the rules and are in in the shelters, they will not cause any uh, serious casualties. Now, people sometimes are outside, which is a real problem. And of course, you get people. The worst scenario is, of course, if you're in your car. So Israelis are riding in their cars, but less than the last time. It's the amount of gasoline that's being sold this year versus last June is down by 19%, which means 19% less people are driving now than they did during the war that took place last year with Iran. Um, mall sales, mall sales are down by 78%. Nobody's going to the mall, and so that's really, you know, I wouldn't want to have I wouldn't want to have a store in a mall, but I wouldn't have a store generally. As I've written, my good friends who have a coffee shop around the corner from me basically said to me the day before yesterday, there's something in Hebrew called chosen, which is resilience of the population. And the government keeps on talking, we can do this because of the resilience of the population. But people are saying, no one asked me for my resilience. And there's a limit to the resilience. Let's put it that way. Not that anyone's going to do anything about it, but it's having a clear impact. As I've written in the first few days, there was euphoria. Oh, big success once more. It's beginning to dawn on people that there's still an outside chance of a big success. There is an outside chance that the Iranian people could take control of their lives, like Trump wants and like Netanyahu wants. But there's also a good possibility that that won't happen. And if it doesn't happen, the big question is why? Why do we do all this right now? And that's really a question. Um, this was as opposed to, let's say, October 7th, which was a war that was imposed on us, or the Yom Kippur War, almost all of our wars. This was a war we went out and decided to fight. And as opposed to in June, when there was clearly an absolute reason. In other words, Iran was very close to having the bomb back then. Uh, Iran is no closer to having the bomb now than when the last war ended. They still have the possibility of retrieving the uranium and doing something with it, but until now they haven't done it. And we did not go to war because they had started retrieving the uranium. We went to war primarily because Donald Trump issued a statement saying America has your back. We're on the way to help the demonstrators, which was a very altruistic statement from a person who didn't believe in regime change. Um, so that's where we came to this point. He made that statement, and there was no real way to back down. And all these other conspiracy theories that Israel forced him or this, it's not true. He made that statement. Yes, I'm no doubt that Netanyahu gave him additional ammunition, as did Lindsey Graham and did other people. But this war came about because of what Trump wrote and didn't want to be an Obama and not stand by the people he said he would help. So that's why he attacked. But again, one of the problems, and this is my biggest single problem. I mean, I don't want to get into all the problems I might have with Trump or not, but the biggest problem I have with both Trump and to a lesser extent Netanyahu, but it's also the case of Netanyahu these days, is there is no staff work that goes into anything. There is no national security apparatus that's talking about the pros and cons and bringing up scenarios and bringing up the unintended consequences. I mean, I do not understand how it's possible that the U.S. went to war with Iran and didn't ensure the fact that they had mine clearing ships nearby, not to have the nearest mine clearing ships in Maryland when you're going to war with Iran, when Iran has always threatened to close the Straits of Hormuz, is like, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. And the fact that they went to war under those circumstances, that there aren't enough American ships for all the ships that are there, they don't have extra ships to even act as escorts because all the U.S. ships are being used to protect the carrier task forces. Now, I'm not saying it's not important to protect the carriers, but if you're going to do this, understand that this was a real possibility. And if it's going to be a real possibility, you better have a solution. But again, this is foreign policy by impulse. This is not foreign policy by process. And processes are sometimes problematic, and processes are sometimes bureaucratic, and sometimes things don't get done quick enough, and sometimes they're too uh, risk averse. So you can make a whole long list of things, but they also bring up all the different potential scenarios, and that wasn't brought up here. And we have something relatively similar in Israel. The army has processes in place, but the army has a very narrow thinking. They're the army, right? The Air Force, the army, they may be better informed. They have the intelligence services that provide different scenarios. But again, army is an army. They don't think in diplomatic terms. They don't think about geopolitical implications. That's not their job. Their job is to win a war and to talk about just the military aspects. We don't have at this point an operational National Security Council in this country like we were supposed to. We don't really have a foreign minister. We have someone who's appointed to be foreign minister, but he has no experience and he doesn't have any respect from Netanyahu in any case. Netanyahu thinks he knows everything when it comes to foreign affairs, and therefore he makes decisions alone because he doesn't have a staff basically at this point. And so decisions, good, bad, or indifferent, look the way they do. And again, we have, over the years, I've written so many articles comparing Trump and Netanyahu from various different ways, but this is a different way. Operating without staff, operating without a process, making decisions without either, it gives us to this point. Now, it doesn't mean necessarily the decision was wrong. To take this opportunity to attack the Iranian regime and maybe bring it down. If it works, it's a great decision. But if it doesn't work, where's Plan B? And that's what's most concerning at this point. Where's Plan B? And for Israel, I think it was an incredible, incredible risk for Israel to become involved in anything but the most passive way until the plan actually took place. I think Netanyahu's trip to Mar-a-Lago a week before or 2 weeks before, whatever it was, will go down in history as a disaster unless this ends up being a big success. Because it showed that Netanyahu, in some form or another, was encouraging Trump to do this. We've lived down. There were all these claims that Israel pushed President Bush to attack Iraq, when the reality was it was the opposite. Sharon warned him not to attack Iraq. Yes, Netanyahu previously wanted him to, but Netanyahu was not really good at making suggestions. But at the time, Netanyahu was in the opposition or was in the government, but was not in an important position. The fact of the matter was, Prime Minister Sharon clearly tried to tell Bush not to do it. But that doesn't stop the conspiracy theorists in the United States from blaming Israel for the Iraq war, which is just false. But here, there'll be at least a nugget of truth. And if it goes bad, it's not going to be good. Let's put it that way. And it won't be good for Israel. It won't be good for the Jews. It's just not going to be good at all. And, on top of which, who are the negotiators? You know, leaving aside the fact that I think it's absurd that there are two people who may be brilliant, although maybe not be brilliant, but two people, maybe really good real estate negotiators, although one of them almost went bankrupt without the Qataris. But let's just say they're good real estate negotiators. That makes them capable of negotiating um, Israel, Iran, Iran, U.S., United States, Russia, all these things together, and throw in a few other conflicts. I mean, who in the world ever heard of that? When Kissinger, who I think everyone will agree, whether you like him or dislike him in terms of history, was incredibly talented as a negotiator and as understanding geopolitics. When he tried to get the uh, disengagement agreements after the Yom Kippur War, he spent a month here basically, shuttle diplomacy back and forth between Jerusalem and Damascus and Jerusalem and Cairo, back and forth, back and forth. And he was literally worked at it a month. That was his only thing he was working on basically. So we expected Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff to be able to simultaneously juggle all these things simultaneously. I mean, I guess President Trump believes in them. And I have nothing against them, mind you. I mean, I think they may be really good, but that good? The ability to do all these things simultaneously? That's pushing things considerably. And we'll see. I mean, we are where we are at this point because of that. Uh, and right now, economically, the situation is not good. The United States is going to have to open the Straits of Hormuz, which is not going to be easy from a military standpoint. As long as the Iranians have the ability to launch drones at the ships, it's going to be a real challenge. The ability to escort each ship is an impossible task. There's just too many of them. Convoys of ships that the U.S. doesn't have enough escort ships in order to do that. You know, one of the things that's happened in the U.S. Navy and all the navies, but primarily the U.S. Navy, is you know better, a smaller number of more powerful ships. Well, that doesn't help when you're trying to escort against drones. When you're trying to against drones, you want to have like 20 what used to be called destroyer escorts that the United States had to escort ships against submarines. Very similar. You want large numbers. And that, yes, the U.S. doesn't even have large numbers. It doesn't, the U.S. once had a 600 ship navy. I think it's down to 270, 280, something like that number of ships. And that includes all the transport and oiling ships and all of those. The U.S. may have the only blue water navy, but it's not nearly as big as it once was. And the ability of the United States to build new ships is limited because the United States made the mistake after the end of the Cold War of allowing all these defense companies to merge and encourage them to merge. Savings, so saving if they merge. But as we all know, when companies merge, you don't get savings, you get higher prices because you have monopolies. That's what's happened in the U.S. defense industry. One of the other things that's become very clear is the fact that this became clear even before this war, became clear during the Ukraine war, is the fact that the U.S. doesn't manufacture enough munitions, and it takes too long. It takes too long to manufacture THAADs, for instance, the interceptors that work very well, but it takes a tremendous amount of time, and each one costs $17 million, as opposed to an Arrow, which costs about $1 million. And I'm not sure how long it takes to manufacture. I'm sure less time, but still lengthy. So things take time, and so there aren't enough of them. Now, there was this story that broke last night about the fact that Israel has told the White House that it's critically short of interceptors. Got a lot of play. It was supposedly picked up by one publication, Semaphore. That's a reasonable publication, actually. Um, read it often, and listen to a podcast on it, but not one of the main publications. Uh, and you have to ask the question: first of all, if Israel was running critically low of interceptors, would it be telling the White House, and who in the White House would it be telling? It would be something that would go to the Defense Department and lays on there. B, uh, the United States knew how many interceptors Israel had at the beginning of the war. I'm sure they did. I mean, we don't know. It's one of the best kept secrets in Israel. However, one thing that has happened is supposedly 350 is the number of launches that the Iranians have launched at Israel in this period of time. Less than half the number of launches they did during the 6 days of during the 12 days last June. Considerably less than half, which means we're not using up the same number of interceptors at the rate we were back then. So I'm very skeptical about the fact that we'll be running low of interceptors. Eventually, if it goes on for months, we might. But this better not be going for months, all I can say. Um, you know, from a personal perspective and from perspective of the country, it shouldn't go on for months. Now, we made a decision also that this was a good time to deal with the Lebanese problem. Now, the Lebanese problem is real. The Lebanese government was supposed to disarm Hezbollah, but Hezbollah agreed to it to bring a ceasefire back when the ceasefire was reached with Lebanon, but they never really planned on disarming the same way that Hamas has never planned on disarming in Gaza. They promised it, but who cares what they promised? They weren't going to disarm. The Lebanese government tried to see what it could do to disarm them, but it realized that its forces are under equipped and could not physically disarm Hezbollah. And so Israel thought it needed to do something about it. Now, there was a real disagreement in the Israeli cabinet, from what I understand, and there's rarely a disagreement in the cabinet when Netanyahu wants to do something. But some ministers actually said, why are we doing this at the same time we're doing Iran? We need to put all our effort in one place. We don't want to divide our efforts. We don't want to divide the Air Force's effort, and we don't want the people to have to deal with two things simultaneously. But when Hezbollah made the mistake of firing a few rockets to show they could identify with the Iranians, we took the opportunity of attacking them in a big way, and then we've turned into a full-scale war with Hezbollah at this point. One thing I thought I was over for a while is every few minutes looking at my watch, which is buzzing, telling me of another rocket attack somewheres up north. Different towns and villages that we know more and know less. Some of them, which I with my son went to visit only a few weeks ago, and the thought of these towns that seem so peaceful and beautiful under the snow-capped mountain, Mount Hermon, are now under almost constant rocket attack is more than disheartening. And it's not clear what the solution is. There's talk about a diplomatic solution that Israel's not running towards for reasonable reason of being skeptical of any sort of diplomatic uh, agreement. The bottom line of any diplomatic agreement is how do you make sure that Hezbollah is going to be willing to disarm? The same way that Hamas is not willing to disarm. And so uh, it really becomes a big question. Now, of course, if you could win, and win only means regime change in Iran, then Hezbollah will die on the vine. Because if Hezbollah doesn't get funding from Iran, it really can't continue. And it'll lose support and it'll lose the ability to maintain the control of the parts of the country. But will that happen? We don't know. It's a big unknown as to what the results are going to be in Iran at this point. So I don't know. We don't know what the scenarios to bring this to an end are. In the meantime, touching on Gaza, Hamas is still there, is regaining control over parts of Gaza, and I mean, it's the same part, but it's maintaining its control and strengthening the part that it has. Every once in a while, it sends uh, forces to engage Israeli forces, and they get killed. But one of these days they might be successful at that. The whole plan for post-war Gaza, nothing is happening relating to that. But Gaza's getting hundreds and hundreds of trucks. Somebody mute themselves. Some getting literally hundreds and hundreds of of hundreds and hundreds of rock of trucks every day filled with food and other supplies and everything else. So that's making no progress at all, and we've sort of forgotten it. In the meantime, uh, there's politics involved in all this. We had the whole nonsense with Trump once again attacking President Herzog, calling him names basically because he won't listen to him and provide a wasn't even a pardon to end his trial in the middle of the trial. Um, I think it pretty much backfired. I think it forced him into a corner, and on top of which, Netanyahu, in his one televised press conference this past week, spent at least half the time demanding that his trial be ended. It was a pretty bad um, scene, let's put it that way, in the middle of the war. That's what he should be talking about, how terrible his trial is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, the bottom line is everyone repeats the line that was sent by some some Israeli politician who said when a prime minister is on trial or being investigated, you can't tell whether he's acting in the good interest of the state or his own personal interests. And that, of course, what was said by Netanyahu about Olmert way back when. But Netanyahu doesn't take his own advice because he has to save us all. In any case, I will bring this to a close right now and open for questions because I just feel like any moment we can get this warning that we may have to bring it to a close. So let me let people ask some questions if they have them, and just raise your hand. Hopefully, we'll see you. Oh, I do want to answer. Someone wrote me personally about the new type of missile that was fired at us today. Just so people understand, its effect is no different than the effect. I forgot what the name of it is. Whatever it is, the effect is no different than than a regular missile. The difference is it's solid state as opposed to liquid, which means it doesn't need to be fueled while standing up and ready to go. So it's ready to go. They can have it in a cave, take it right and fire it almost straight from the entrance to the cave. So there's very little time to destroy it on the ground. But once it's in the sky, it could be intercepted just in the exact same way as the regular missiles, and it doesn't carry any bigger or smaller warhead. It's the same thing. Just the issue it's more difficult to shoot it before it actually flies. Brian,
Yeah, Mark. What would failure look like, and what would be the consequences, in your view, of whatever failure in this? war would be like for Israel in particular.
Okay, so we can divide it into two or three parts. Failure number one is, of course, vis-a-vis the United States. We're in pretty deep trouble, I think, looking forward in terms of support in the United States. The last poll shows that more Americans are sympathetic to the Palestinians than are to Israel. We're more and more trouble amongst the young MAGA groups. And of course, clearly, um, if this fails, Donald Trump can't be responsible. It'll have to be Israel that's responsible. So Israel will be the scapegoat of a failure if it takes place, if this is what the end result is. So that's one view. Well, not one view, one aspect. And I fear that almost in any case at this point, even if it's mildly successful, I think Israel is going to be blamed for the whatever negatives will be, and there'll be negatives. There'll be more American soldiers are going to die. The price of gas is going to remain high for a while, and all those things. Israel is going to be the one who's going to be blamed for all of that. Never Donald Trump, at least uh, amongst the Republicans, and so that's number one. Number two for Israel is if this ends without getting the uranium, that's the uh, that the Iranians have, the enriched uranium, then we're going to have you know, we're going to have a country really, really angry at us. Not that they loved us before, and with all belief that if okay, this happened, the only solution is to have an atomic bomb, and they'll rush for the bomb to create the bomb. That's something we have to be really concerned about. Look, overall, it's always been a problem, right? In other words, we never had any disputes with the Persians, and we got along well with the Persians over the years. We got along well with the Iranians. For whatever reason, this particular strain of Shiite extremism decided that Israel um, was a major geopolitical factor to them. They partly used it because they wanted to have an important place in the Arab world because the Persians are not Arabs, but they wanted a major place in the Arab world. And the way to get somewhere in the Arab world is to be anti-Israel. So that's part of how they developed their hatred towards us. But now we've given them real reasons between this time and last time. We've given real reasons to hate us and to want revenge. Again, doesn't mean they wouldn't have hated us before, wouldn't want revenge before, but we put it on steroids. And then, of course, there's what does it mean? Again, failure um, to the chosn, to the resilience of this country and to the people and everything else. Um, Part of that, of course, will be resolved at the polls come September, October, whenever the election is. Obviously, it looks like a success wasn't going to help Netanyahu at all. Polls after the first week of the war didn't show him gaining anything. What will happen if there's a failure or just continued muddling on? I can't imagine it's going to help him. And of course, that's a whole other story. If a new government comes, there are all sorts of possibilities, but I'm not holding my breath. I'm just hopeful in that direction.
Thank you.
Okay, you raise. Someone's raising their hand. I can't see the name, but just speak.
It's Mark.
Okay, go ahead.
Uh, First of all, Mark, thanks for everything. The information that you provide is really invaluable, and we really appreciate the daily update. So thank you.
Thanks.
One question that we have, we read a lot and hear a lot about the mining of the Straits of Hormuz, but we're unclear exactly how that works. How does Iran actually lay the mines? How the mines seek out or find the ships, or do the ships just run into them? What's the process? Do you understand how that works?
Okay, partly. So understand something. The mines um, are placed in particular locations. The Iranians can't have mines that move around, etc., because they need to know where the mines are because they've been allowing their own ships to go through. So they have to know what the minefield looks like. So that they have to map a minefield. Um, they can put mines out in small boats. I mean, yes, theoretically, in the real world, people use big ships. The U.S. used to have mine laying ships. Ships were particularly designed for laying minefields. Destroyers um, used to certainly have the main capacity of laying mines. It's less of a thing more recently, mine laying, but it's still a thing. And so, but the Iranians are using just small boats in order to place the mines. They don't have to place too many in order to make it dangerous to travel there. You need special ships with special equipment in order to find the mines and remove them. And the U.S. had ships like that in the Gulf until, I don't know, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, we removed them. They still have a couple of ships like that in the inventory, but I think that last I heard they were in Maryland, and that's a 2 week journey at least to the Gulf, even more because you have to go around the Suez and come up and around. So that will be a challenge, but it's not the mines that provide the greatest challenge to closing the Straits of Hormuz. What provides the greatest challenge is the fact that all they need is a couple of anti-ship missiles still located along the shores. All they need is some drones to attack the ships. That's enough in order to stop a commercial ship that doesn't have any sort of anti missile systems. U.S. Navy ships all are equipped with systems to both take down drones, and they are very effective against drones. Let's put it that way, because they have these very high speed guns that are very effective, and they have anti drone missiles as well, and anti missile missiles on some of the ships. But commercial vehicles don't. So all you have to do is a tanker with highly flammable oil going through the straits, and all you need is one drone hitting in the right place, and poof. And it's very hard to protect against that.
Thanks. I wonder if I could get one more question, just a quick one.
Okay.
Trump is calling upon all these other nations to now come to the Straits and support the U.S. in Israel and its effort. How likely do you think that's going to happen, and which nations do you think are going to come on board, and which are just going to ignore him?
Well, look, one of the great problems of Trump is the fact he doesn't believe, generally speaking, in multilateralism. And so, if Biden had called for it, he probably would have gotten a lot of countries to come and send ships because he'd work with them. Trump turned his back on most of Europe when it comes to Ukraine to a very large extent, has basically allowed them to spend their money and buy, but they're certainly not helping in any active way. I mean, now the United States is asked help, from Ukraine, and Ukraine is giving the U.S. help. What an irony that is. Israel's also asked for help, and again, what ironies are there as well. But you can't, when you walk away from international coalitions and you don't build international coalitions and you only get places by coercion. And coercion, I'm going to take Greenland and I'm going to raise tariffs. I'm going to do all these things. Then, if you can coerce people enough, maybe you can get them to do something, but not very quickly. Let's put it that way. No one is rushing to help Donald Trump in the world. Nowhere's in the world, with a few exceptions, which is part of the problem of Donald Trump. And again, he may have some good ideas once in a while, but multilateralism is not one of them. And multilateralism in this case is what the U.S. needs. Other countries helping. Theo.
Sorry. Hi, I actually have two questions. And my first is in keeping with what you're discussing, and I'll just ask it and then move to my other question. But it's the bombing by us of the Iranian oil fields and the black rain that's falling on the people. What's the strategy there?
Okay, so
And then,
I'll answer that, and then you can ask the second question. Look, the strategy was to say that we can destroy their oil fields. The rain is not continuing to fall. It fell for a day or two, and that's it. By all accounts, the Iranian people, despite, one thing I have to say, which is really pretty disturbing, and, I'm not one of these people who's against the media, generally speaking, but I have to say the way the media has been handling all of this has been really problematic. Stories that come straight out of the Iranian propaganda ministry about how the Iranian people are turning against the United States because of the attacks. Maybe it's true, but from all I'm hearing of Iranians who are somehow being reached by Israeli reporters, directly and indirectly, is that the Iranians are very happy with what's going on, and they're unhappy when it stops happening. And as one of them said, it's safe in Tehran because only military targets are being hit. So that's the reality. I mean, yes, sometimes people die, and sometimes they're mistakes, and war is terrible, and all those things. But generally speaking, munitions these days is incredibly accurate and Very few times are mistakes made. And so the black rain, there was some black rain. Okay. Um, Israel is not, and the United States has not attacked the oil of Iran until now. Partially because we want to say that if the people revolt and there's a new government, there'll be something for them to do and to build back their economies very quickly, et cetera, et cetera. Plus the fear that if you remove the Iranian oil from the world oil markets, you're going to further squeeze the oil markets and further increase the price of oil in parts of the world. So even though we don't like the fact that Iran is shipping oil to China, but we're allowing it, we could stop it, but we're not. Because if China doesn't get the Iranian oil, they're going to try to buy some other oil, and guess what? They're going to negotiate up the price even higher. So that's why that has taken place. Second question.
Uh, yeah, you and I kind of discussed it last week, but I'm seeing this new phenomenon, particularly after the Detroit synagogue attack, the North Bloomfield synagogue attack, that American Jews I see on social media are en masse backing away from Israel, and that bond that started in '67 and solidified, and many of us grew up with the obvious bond. It just seems like all these not anti-Zionist Jews, not ultra-progressive Jews, but mainstream Jews are putting stuff out on the internet as though to shield themselves from anti-Semitism in the States by saying, why are you bombing our synagogues? We're not Israel. Israel's making this war. Israel did this in Gaza. That's not us. Why are you associating us with this anti-Zionist activity? And they're really, making this effort to separate anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, and responding by, I think it looks like they're hiding under rocks and going into shtetls and stuff, completely separating themselves from Israel. It's shocking to me.
Okay, so first of all, it's true, but it didn't start now. It's been a phenomenon that's been going on now for a fairly significant amount of time, even before the Gaza war. Certainly on the left, um, and on the right, the Jews on the right have not. The Jews on the right are standing up, but they're being, they're dealing with the Tucker Carlson, who, by the way, it looks like there's something happening right now in terms of accusing him of being an agent for the Iranians. There may actually be an indictment or something taking place. It's not exactly clear what's happening with that, but we'll leave that part aside. But look, it's a Jewish way of hiding. What can I tell you? You're putting your head in the sand, and that's been our tradition for a long, long time. Israel was supposed to change that. But it's like you can make whatever statement you want. It's not going to help. I mean, you heard this ridiculous thing, interview of some, I guess they were an Arab American in Detroit, saying, "Well, the name of the shul said Israel on it." I mean, really? And then I think the New York Times or someone else wrote the fact that this, when it was founded with the idea of Israel in mind in 1942. Okay, as the Holocaust is developing Europe, someone had an idea of Israel, and that's why you can make an excuse for attacking the synagogue. And that was literally, I believe it was in the New York Times, part of the article, that was the pseudo justification for it. Um, you can make another argument, leaving aside what you just said, that most surveys of American Jews show that about 80% of them support Israel, in whatever means that means. Almost none of them are Zionists in the classic sense. When I used to fight in the 1970s of what Zionism meant to me, 1970s Zionism meant moving to Israel. Anyone who didn't move to Israel wasn't a Zionist. But leave that part aside. I have a much wider acceptance of what Zionism means today in my old age. But people say, okay, the Jews support Israel, so the Jews must be bad. That's there in their crazy minds. There's no way to avoid it. There's no way of getting away from it. Zionism, excuse me, anti-Semitism is the oldest conspiracy theory. We live in a time when conspiracy theories are stronger than anything else. There are more conspiracy theories floating around the internet and coming on TikTok and all these other places, and there's almost no way to fight it. I did an interview. I'm not sure if when I'm going to put it up with guy who's fighting anti-Semitism, going around and speaking, etc., etc. But I don't know what you can do about it. There's very
It's
little you can.
working.
What?
It's working. That's the thing that I've never seen before is it's working.
It's been working for a while. It's at the edges. It works slowly. It moves further and further. It moves from the edges a little bit more into the center, and what was considered extremely fringe is now no longer fringe. And Fuentes, who no one would touch with a 10-foot pole, is now invited to, all the major podcasters have to interview him, and he gets interviewed by major, news channels and everything else. So what was fringe, what wasn't acceptable, is now acceptable. And that's the reality. Now, look, again, I had an interesting discussion with somebody in a coffee shop today. Um, we were talking about where is it safer to be a Jew, and his statement was, "Well, it's safest to be in Israel is to be a Jew in Israel." And I said to him, "Well, you know what? I said we were also talking about America, and I said, well, things don't look particularly good in America, generally speaking, and I wouldn't want to move back to America, leaving aside all the other issues because it doesn't look particularly good." But if you want to look at the statistics, I mean, Israel's the worst place to be a Jew these days, statistically. Now, I feel much safer being a Jew here because, well, guess what? No one's going to kill me without someone trying to defend me. And that's the ultimate part of Zionism. That's what it amounts to. Yes, I could get killed tomorrow. An Iranian missile could land on our house and crush our bomb shelter below us. But guess what? 50 meters from my house, there's an anti-missile system that's firing out if something is getting close. Will it succeed? Well, it will succeed 95% of the times, but something is actively defending me. And I have an army that's actively defending me. And yes, there are a lot of people out there who'd like to kill me, whether Hamas or Hezbollah or just a Palestinian in some village in the West Bank. And I would get into a whole other story, which I don't have to get into right now, but they all would probably prefer me dead. But guess what? A significant portion of Americans these days, I fear, are beginning to think the same way about Jews in America. And the problem in America is you don't know where it's going to come from. And at least here, I know where it's going to come from, and I have something to defend me. And I guess ultimately that's what Zionism was all about, that Jews should defend themselves. Um, it's sad that we're there. It's sad that we're in the 21st century, and this is what we're talking about, and this is how we're defining Zionism. Instead of, building a utopia, a nation to all nations and showing what beautiful things we can do. No, we're talking about the fact that we can defend ourselves. It's very sad. But it's our reality. It would seem it's the reality of Jews worldwide, whether you like it or not. Um, Anyone else? Okay, my wife is saying, yeah. So talk up whoever you are because I don't see the hand. So just speak. Who is it? Okay, if somebody wants to speak, just speak. Okay. Okay. Well, if no one has any other questions, then I will thank you all. I also thank you all for being subscribers, and those of you who are paid subscribers, double thank you. Um, it's makes us keeps us going to some extent. Uh, I had hoped to switch this to being once a month. Time of peace, we could talk about politics, we could talk about society, we could talk about religion versus state, and all these major issues that have engaged all of us. And we will soon be engaged, I hope, in the political race that'll be taking place. But in the meantime, if we don't sleep through the night, it's hard to really focus on other things. And these have not, again, I feel for all the people up north much more than for me. They're living a much worse life. People who are getting notifications and have to be in the bomb shelter in 20 seconds. That's much more difficult than the minute and a half we have when it's coming from Lebanon. A minute and a half really isn't quite enough, especially if you're asleep, but okay. But the 5, 6, 7 minutes we have from Iran, it's almost leisurely. But the people up north don't have that. I'm hopeful it will end. I have revised I was supposed to be coming to the States Friday morning. Obviously, I didn't come. Couldn't come even if I wanted to because all regular flights have been canceled out of the country. But I'm an optimist. I have a flight towards the end of April, and I'm optimistic that by then this will be over. Um, I hope it ends in a positive way. It's very important that it ends in a positive way, but none of us have any control over that. It's partly up to the Iranian people. It's partly up to leadership. It's partly up to President Trump, who has any idea what he's thinking. So again, thank you all for joining me.
Mark, can I get one question in at the
Sure.
end?
Go ahead.
Sorry. You think there's going to be a ground invasion of Lebanon?
Everything
And
is lining up for that at the moment. They're bringing up the troops. They've called up reserves. All of those things. The French are trying to put together a peace plan, which doesn't seem reasonable. I mean, it seems reasonable in theory. It includes Lebanon recognizing Israel, but again, the bottom line question, and it's the one that no one has a solution to, is who disarms Hezbollah. Now, I don't think we can either. You know, it's one of these things. We have this view these days that with arms we can accomplish anything. We fought Hamas for 2 years. We won every battle, but I'm not sure we won. You know, but we lost the war in a way. Because Hamas still exists, and yes, we occupy 60% of Gaza, but they control 95% of the population. So what are we going to do in Lebanon? Okay, Lebanon, there, the people, the country wants Hezbollah out. They want Hezbollah to disarm. But how to make that happen? I don't know that us, we'll move forward. We'll go further into Lebanon, but we're going to, are we going to go all the way up north, to the north end, are we going to go to the Baca Valley and even further to Baalbek? And are we going to, beat them on the ground? We can do it. It'll cost in troops, it'll cost in time, and certainly the world will suddenly say we're massacring Lebanese. I'm just waiting for the massacres and whatever we're about to be accused of. But I think that's where we're going. I hope we're not going there, but I'm not sure what the other solution is. We should never, again, we seem to think that our enemies can suddenly be convinced to stop being our enemies just because we're stronger than them. And that's just not the case. The only way they can be convinced not to be our enemies is if it's in their interests. The same way it was in the Egyptian interest to reach a peace agreement with us as a country. The same way it was in the Jordanian interest. The people in Jordan and Egypt don't love us at the moment, but they're willing to live in peace with us. The same for the people in the UAE and other places in their interest. Can we make it in the interest of the people of Hezbollah, the supporters, the Shiite supporters? We have one big problem, and that's religion. They're religious. They're religious fanatics in that sense, the same way that we have our fanatics. And it's something that this conflict has turned partly religious, maybe fully religious. I'm not even sure at this point. But religious wars are really, really hard to end. Just think of the 100-Year Wars, war in Europe between Protestants and Catholics. And they were both Christians, right? 100 years, the two of them fought. So I'm not optimistic in that sense. I don't know. A few years of peace would be nice. A few months would be nice, but a few years of peace would be nice. Let us rebuild, let us reconstitute, and let's also figure out what we can do in the United States to stop losing support amongst the American people. Okay. Once again,
a quick follow-up on that, if I might.
Sure.
Is the Lebanese army unable, unwilling, or a little bit of each to?
Unable. I mean, they're not willing because they're unable. The Lebanese, there are three things to keep in mind about the Lebanese army. The average Lebanese army soldier gets about 20% of the salary of a Hezbollah fighter. Number two, he's not all that well armed and well trained. And number three, he has amongst his other soldiers Shiites who may or may not be sympathetic to Hezbollah. The army is integrated. It's not, not made of just Christians and Druze. It's made of just Druze and Shiites as well, and Sunnis, obviously. So all those reasons, again, it would be the best thing. The best outcome would be the Lebanese army disarms them, but they haven't in the past. It's been almost a year, and they haven't succeeded in disarming them. So why would we expect they'll be able to disarm them now all of a sudden? There has to be another factor involved, and I don't see France is trying to do something, but I don't see the French sending troops. And if the French send troops, all they'd end up doing is protecting Hezbollah from us, which is not a good outcome in and of itself.
Thank you.
Okay. Once again, thank you, everybody. I guess I'll see you all in 2 weeks. Take care of yourselves.